Episode 0: Global Power Shifts, Geopolitics and Predictions. Over the next decade, some of the biggest shifts in global power probably won't start with tanks crossing borders. They'll start with a law that seemed boring when it passed. A data center in a place most people can't find on a map. A change to how chips, oil, or rare earths move through the system. By the time it shows up in the headlines, the story is already years old. This channel is for people who want to see those stories earlier. You're watching Global Power Shifts, Geopolitics and Predictions. Here we are not doing vibes, we are doing vectors. We will look at how power is actually structured and how it moves, through geography, demography, technology, money, and ideas. Then we will make bounded forecasts, short, concrete outlooks for the next 30 to 60 days, sometimes out to a year, and occasionally farther when the structure really supports it. The goal is not to be a prophet, the goal is to be legible. In episode 0, I want to do 3 things. First, explain what this channel is and what it isn't. Second, walk you through the basic method we'll use in every episode. And third, show you that method on a live example, so you can decide if this is useful enough to keep in your feed. Let's start with what this is not. This is not a breaking news channel. If your main question is, what happened in the last 12 hours? There are entire newsrooms built for that. This is also not a place for partisan hot takes. I have views, but they're not the product. What I'm trying to build here is a kind of public notebook, a running transparent log of how I think about power, how I update when the world surprises me, and which forecasts held up or broke. If that's interesting, you're in the right place. Now, what is this channel? At a high level, it's 3 overlapping series. The first is Politics and Power. Here we'll look at states, parties, leaders, and institutions. Who actually make the decisions, who can veto them, and what constraints they're really under. The second is Conflicts and War. Not just current wars, but also frozen conflicts, gray zone operations, and the kind of crisis that can move from "this will never happen" to "how did we not see this coming" in a week. The third is AI and tech geopolitics. How chips, models, data centers, undersea cables, and emerging technologies like autonomous weapons are reshaping the map of power. Most episodes will sit at the intersection of those 3. So how will this actually work? In each episode, we'll pick a focal question, something like, over the next 60 days, how likely is the current US-Israel-Iran war to pull more Gulf states into direct, undeniable confrontation? Or, in the next 30 days, what's the probability that a major AI-related export control changes the chip supply chain for good? We'll write that question down in clear, falsifiable terms so that later we can say, did this happen or not? Then we'll walk through 3 layers. Layer 1, structure. What are the hard constraints? Geography, resources, demographics, industrial capacity, alliances. Layer 2, incentives. What do key actors want? What do they fear? And what can they actually do about it? Layer 3, signals. What has changed recently that matters? New laws, new deployments, new sanctions, new leaks. We'll use those layers to build a small set of scenarios, assign rough probabilities, and write down what we would expect to see in the next 30 to 60 days if each scenario were true. Those expectations become our tripwires. To make this concrete, let's walk through a simplified example. Suppose our focal question is, over the next 60 days, how likely is it that the fighting between Iran and its neighbors shifts from mostly proxy and standoff strikes to a sustained, direct Gulf theater that nobody can ignore? Layer 1, structure. Iran sits on a critical geography, the northern shore of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for a significant share of global oil and gas flows. It has a large population, a mix of conventional forces and missile capabilities, and a network of non-state partners across the region. Its Gulf neighbors, especially Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, are wealthier on a per capita basis, heavily armed, and deeply integrated into the global energy and financial system. The United States and other external powers have security commitments and major bases across the Gulf, and are already directly involved in strikes on Iran. So structurally, any further escalation in the Gulf theater risks deeper disruption to energy flows and shipping, drawing in additional regional and extra-regional powers, and triggering a chain of escalation that nobody can fully control. That pushes the baseline probability of truly unconstrained escalation down, but keeps the probability of a sustained, high-pressure confrontation uncomfortably high. Layer 2, incentives. Iran's leadership wants regime survival, regional influence, and enough deterrent power that external actors think twice before trying to unseat it. In the current war, Tehran is also trying to raise the costs of U.S.-Israeli operations by targeting U.S. bases, Gulf infrastructure, and energy flows, betting that global markets and regional states will pressure Washington to de-escalate. Its Gulf neighbors want internal stability, continued energy exports, and space to pursue their own development visions. They did not want this war, and many initially tried to keep some distance from the U.S.-Iran confrontation. But Iranian missile and drone strikes on their territory and infrastructure are pushing them back toward tighter security alignment with the United States. All of the major players want to avoid a full-scale regional war that wrecks infrastructure, spikes energy prices indefinitely, and fractures domestic legitimacy. So incentives pull against total escalation, even as fear of looking weak and domestic pressure pull toward visible retaliation. Layer 3, signals. Here we track the tempo and targeting of Iranian missile and drone strikes, changes in U.S. and allied deployments in and around the Gulf, public and private messaging from Gulf capitals, and any movement on ceasefire talks or back-channel deconfliction. If we see sustained attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure and ports, open statements from Gulf states that they are shifting from neutrality to active defense alongside the U.S., and growing signs that Hormuz will remain effectively closed to tanker traffic, that pushes our probability estimate up for a prolonged, high-risk Gulf theater. If instead we start to see a sustained drop-off in strikes on Gulf targets, active mediation with real concessions on the table, and clear, coordinated moves to reopen energy and shipping lanes that would pull our estimate down. Once we've walked those layers, we might end up with a simple structure like this. Scenario A, the war stays focused on Iran, Israel, and the U.S., with the Gulf mostly absorbing spillover, but avoiding full co-belligerent status. Scenario B, a sustained but managed Gulf theater, regular strikes and missile defense activity, but with clear red lines and ongoing back-channel communication. Scenario C, a broader regional war with multiple Gulf states openly entering the conflict and long-term disruption to Hormuz and energy exports. We assign rough probabilities. For example, 40%, 45%, 15% over the next 60 days. And we write down what we'd expect to see in the news and in the data if each scenario were unfolding. Those expectations go in a public log. Then when we come back in 30 or 60 days, we don't just say, I was right or I was wrong. We ask, did we pick the right structure? Did we miss an incentive? Did we ignore important signals? That's the core loop of this channel. If this sounds slow and deliberate, that's the point. You can scroll for outrage anywhere. Here, we're going to slow the story down so we can actually see the machinery. Over time, as we build up episodes, you'll be able to see how one forecast connects to another, how an energy decision in one part of the world shows up months later in a defense procurement somewhere else. You'll also see my mistakes. When a forecast breaks, we'll do post-mortems, look at what surprised us, and update the mental models. If you want to follow along, you don't need any special background. I'll explain terms as we go, and when I lean on more technical frameworks, I'll either define them on screen or link to a deeper dive. You can think of this channel as a long-running course on how to think about power in a messy, multipolar world, with the difference that the test is reality. So that's episode 0. From here, we'll start applying this method to specific cases, crises you're seeing in the headlines right now, slow burn trends nobody has time to cover in depth, in the places where AI and other technologies are quietly rewiring the system under our feet. If you want to help steer that, tell me in the comments which country, conflict, or technology you want to see modeled next. The world isn't getting simpler, But with the right tools, it can become more legible, in the future, a little less surprising. This is Global Power Shifts, Geopolitics and Predictions. Let's get to work.